Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the newest album from Parquet Courts called Wide Awake. So I will freely admit that Parquet Courts can be a bit of an obtuse band to review or even talk about. They're drenched in tones half pulled from the Velvet Underground and Wire and that brand of art rock, but also contorting into weird spaces with lyrics that are socially resonant for sure, but making a lot of sense of any of them could be a real effort. And the group's always skirted being a personal favorite of mine in comparison with acts pulling on similar material in art rock or post-punk. Think Preoccupations or Ought or even Ice Age. Now, granted, that's not to dismiss Parquet Courts and their albums. Their last album, Human Performance, has only grown on me, and it landed its title track on my top 50 best songs of 2016. But I've been waiting for that moment where Parquet Courts will really step up, really deliver for me. So, could Wide Awake be that moment? Reportedly, the band was looking to make this a punk record that you could put on at parties, and for production, they brought in Brian Burton, aka Danger Mouse, a producer with whom I've got a very complicated relationship from his work with the Black Keys and Broken Bells to production that he's provided, say, the Red Hot Chili Peppers or Portugal the Man, and not exactly production I have liked. Look, suffice to say, in recent years, I found his material increasingly desaturated and really dreary, but the last thing I would want to hear pair with a Parquet Courts record that's described as a punk album you could put on at parties. But hey, Wide Awake could still be pretty fun, pretty good, right? Well, honestly, I think some of this review might be my fault. See, I want to know this is probably Parquet Courts at their most refined, sharp, literate, and damn near accessible record to date. Probably their best objectively. And to me, it almost seems like it does everything right. And yet I feel like I'm not quite as excited about this as I want to be. And while some of that does tie into a larger issue with the album that I will get to, and one that if you've been following the review thus far, you can probably already guess it. But some of it's also tied to the fact that I'm not quite as wowed by the content as a lot of people seem to be, especially in comparison to the more dense abstraction that characterized their last album that really did grow on me. This is a lot more direct, and yet it's not quite resonating to make this one of the best of the year. Still great though, and I recommend it for sure. So let's start off with that content, where Parquet Courts are easily attracting the most attention. Basically, for once, you can actually figure out pretty quickly what they're talking about, where the murky abstraction of Human Performance gives way to the sort of strident and consistently political statement that Pitchfork outright called Soviet propaganda. Because of course they did. And honestly, it's a damn shame they defaulted to calling it propaganda using that language. Because while Wide Awake has a pronounced leftward slant, and the band would not deny that, it's also presented in a way that doesn't distort or mislead the audience. If anything, there's a lot more precision and nuance deconstructing the left than you would expect, given how easy it would be for the band to default to sloganeering, with songs like Violence Overload with the sort of barking, fast-paced, detail-rich delivery from frontman Andrew Savage that recalls, say, Minutemen, circa double nickels on the dime. But what's very telling here is that while there is very much a political framework surrounding a lot of these songs, the broader themes are actually more balanced and philosophical and more focused on the contrast between the collective ambition and the individual. And Total Football, great example of this, the opening song, and highlighting how people can work together to attain a larger deconstructive goal to dismantle established discriminatory systems while still maintaining a lot of personal, individual autonomy, which is not contradictory, believe it or not. A collective ambition does not imply an authoritarian follow-through, and the grounding in sports metaphors does a really solid job adding texture to that language. And yet, Savage is naturally something of a paranoid skeptic, so he does throw jabs at the larger collectives that would seek to suborn a larger process or have that authoritarian angle. From the curdled tension at a callous mob on the right on Almost Had to Start a Fight in and out of Patience, to how he takes calls for Freebird, makes it into a sequel, and then turns out to be a sensitive song about growing up with a rough childhood and trying to show fellow individuals like his put upon mother a deeper level of compassion, while realizing at some points he would have to leave her behind to free them both of that maternal obligation. And that is a major key and theme to this album. Savage, he's not denying the individual agency in a deeply held core of optimism, which I found really charming, as even he acknowledges that he has succumbed to nihilism a few too many times in the past. He doesn't want want to do that anymore. But it's also really damn hard and lonely to be that solitary figure on your own, especially arrayed against the constant wear and tear of systemic injustice and real violence. I mean, the most blunt example comes early with violence, shredding into systemic racism, gentrification, the erasure of history, and the media's framing of all their protests against that as revolt, and then it's reflected again and again, from normalization to the endemic homelessness of NYC observation, to how wearing the mask of ironic detachment can very quickly become one's reality on Extinction, with that extinction being that of the self and losing individuality. But it's also well paced by the melancholic resignation of Mardi Gras beads and the relationship that's taken for companionship as love just flickers away, to the internal processing of grief in the face of death, either of a loved one on Death Will Bring Change, or of his own in the future on Back to Earth. So, in circling back, why not work with others for that collective ambition to bring comfort and some real change along the way? Which is why Tenderness is such a fantastic way to end the record, probably my favorite song here. In contrast to the systemic collective denial and frightened individualism in the face of inevitable environmental calamity on Before the Water Gets Too High, you can probably guess what that's about. Savage, he doesn't wall away his emotionality. He accepts the limits of his own projection as artist to the audience, and he aims to embrace a larger goal with everybody together, which helps soothe some of his own deeper troubles, makes him feel like more of a part of something bigger. In short, when I look at political art, even despite me hearing many of these messages before from left-wing philosophy YouTube, which I've been binging recently, I can't deny that Andrew Savage distills them into a populist but nuanced picture that works to balance the contradictions in this leftward ideology as much as he possibly can. There's definitely precision to his message, and I respect that. So okay, that's two of my P's for great political art: populism, precision. What about the power? Well, this is where we're gonna have to talk about Brian Burton. And really, this is probably the first record in a while that he's produced that I don't entirely mind what he's done. It's not that far afield from what Parquet Courts has put out before. He certainly aimed to push the band in a more complex and layered direction. The bass lines and grooves are far more developed and punchy, often carrying their own melody into the blend of sharp, wire-esque guitars, the organs, the piano, and even weirder tones like the omnichord providing the drippy backdrop on Before the Water Gets Too High against the dub groove, or even the pseudo-gothic swell on Back to Earth, where it almost sounds like it's got an accordion in it, or it sounds like steel drums from the dance hall and funk touches on that title track. And that's not disregarding the distinctive callbacks to mid-70s funk with the thicker vocal overdubs, which definitely an acquired taste for me, but opposite the noisy guitars, organs, and killer bass groove on Violence, it definitely wound up clicking, or even the touches of dreamier 60s psychedelics that have always kind of lurked behind Parquet Courts' nervier punk sign, but with arrangements like the sunshine pop of Mardi Gras beads, it coalesces a lot more fully. And yet if I'm looking for a flaw on this album, it would probably come in the production, and it's sadly similar to a lot of other Brian Burton produced albums. For as good as the guitar melodies are, it's hard to avoid the feeling that with a little bit more scuzz and grit and heft to them, these songs might connect harder for me. And I fully realize it's more of a personal nitpick than normal. Hell, with even the more restrained production here, it does a lot to balance out and accentuate the nuance and Savage's more melodic tendencies on several of these songs, especially in his vocals, highlight the more considered arrangements that might not have been fully appreciated with some of the noisier albums. But I can't help but feel the production winds up feeling a little too washed out, lacking that texture that made songs like Human Performance so visceral and immediate for me. Oh, you know what? There are still songs that get close. The punk-leaning mashup of Almost Had to Start a Fight in and out of Patience, the jagged, noisy breakdowns of Normalization, the brittle, melodic interplay of NYC Observation that gets even faster and sharper on Extinction, and again, especially that absolutely terrific pub piano line on Tenderness. It's still probably the best song here. But as a whole, alright, look, this is a great album, and I will freely admit that many of the hang-ups about expecting more edge or the politics not feeling that revolutionary to me, they're flaws in the media that I've been gorging myself on recently, not of the record itself. And while Burton does not get off scot-free here as a producer, I do feel he's more responsible for some of the melodic refinement and diversity on this project that I definitely respect and appreciate, showing Parquet Courts leaning into their art rock side with a lot of thoughtful consideration, and really some ridiculously catchy songs. The doubling down on melody was probably a good thing for them. And like with Human Performance, this album only got better with every single listen. So I'm gonna lean on the positive and give it an 8 out of 10. Definitely recommended, especially if you're looking for a more accessible entry point to Parquet Courts. And if this is coming out of a point for some greater popular exposure for the band, well, all the more power to them, because this is some damn sharp indie rock, definitely worth your time. Check this out. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Again, political reference, don't get into it in the comments. This album is smart enough to really transcend a lot of easy jibes that I made in this review. But hey, you want to talk about it, comments down there below. You want to buy the record, in the description below. And I got the poll up there where you guys can all tell me what side you all fall on this. I think a lot of people will tend to like it. I haven't seen a lot of backlash against this sound being a little bit cleaner than Human Performance, even though that really is my big nitpick. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And if you guys want to help support this channel or get involved in my scheduling process, so I could have covered this earlier, link to my Patreon right over there, where 3 times a week you guys get to vote on my schedule, and once a week for the higher tier contributors, you guys get to add albums, movies, or even a top 10 list to that schedule. More details right there. If you want to see a schedule, it's on my Instagram, link below. But till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.